Sammy Squirrel was the kind of squirrel that always seemed to be getting into trouble because he could never find a warm place. You ever have that kind of a squirrel around your property? They make a mess of the bird feeder. They can dig around the foundation. They always get under the deck, it seems, or in the back of the garage. They find some warm little cubby hole, and they're just looking for a warm place to be. Now, I'm not saying go and invite the little squirrels in, because we know what kind of mess that they can make. But I am going to tell you a story about little Sammy Squirrel, who got sick and tired of being out in the cold. All through the winter. Every time there was a breeze in from that one direction, his little home in the knothole of the old tree just wasn't up to snuff. The wind came in, the snow was in one ear, he was sure it was blowing out the other. Oh, it was cold! He didn't like that he had to, in cold days, go out and dig for his food. There's only so much that he could store up in that little knothole, and he ran through that some fast. Occasionally he'd dig up somebody else's nut pile. Life was pretty rough for Sammy. He wanted something better. He wanted something warmer. Well, he started talking around the animal community. He heard about the geese. Now, the geese had a great deal going. They'd come up for the warm time in the neighborhood. But when it got cold, they'd up and fly south, someplace warm it seemed. But, the only people they took with them were the ducks. They didn't take anybody with them on their backs. Sammy didn't figure he could hitch a ride. They always squawked at him a lot when he came by. Sammy looked around at the other animals and said, "Well, what do you do to stay warm, Mr. Beaver?" Oh, Mr. Beaver said, "I've got this great hut that I make, this lodge of sticks and mud, and it's safe and it's warm and I can cuddle up in there. Do you like the smell of fish?" That didn't sound very appealing to Sammy Squirrel. So a beaver home wasn't ideal for him, and he couldn't fly south like with the geese. No, Sammy started asking around and came across his neighbor, the chipmunk. Oh, they were always fighting over whose nuts were whose. But they were both cold in the winter, and that little chipmunk did not have a big fluffy tail like Sammy did. Maybe Sammy could find a place where they could both be. And then there were the field mice. Well, they were in a similar situation. All curled up in the heavy grass, under the peat. Never quite warm enough, always seemed to be wet, dank. Well, they got together one day, and they had a little meeting. And just having the meeting, being together, got a little warmer. They felt that they were not alone, and the winds weren't quite so bad, it seemed, that night that they were together. And so they looked around all over the place to try and find a home that was suitable that they could all stay in and maybe invite others in. Yeah. It started off just trying not to be cold and on his own. But soon Sammy had a whole circle of friends. And when they couldn't find one nut pile, they found another and they shared it. And all had enough. And it changed the way that Sammy looked at winter, because it was no longer a time when they were off and on their own and in the cold. Winter became the time when they could sit down together, share fellowship, and be warm in spite of the cold. To be together in spite of the loneliness. Let that be a lesson for the church. There's a lot of people out there who are alone that seem to be content in some way to be on their own. They haven't been asked, I'm sure. But that would love a fellowship where there was warmth, there was care. I even hear in churches there's food from time to time. When we gather together and we share the blessings we've been given, we find more than warmth and shelter from the cold. We discover the joy we are meant to have. May God bless and keep you as you come together with those that God has called you to love.